Hola, buen dia. It's me, Peppermint. And when I'm not on RuPaul's Drag Race or simply being New York City's sweetest diva, I'm tuned into the fabulously empowering Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice Power Hour, coming to you every weeknight at 7 p.m. live from our good old friends at the BRCSJ Virtual HQ via their Facebook page. Tune in tonight.
Need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour. Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends in the West, and good in-between time to our friends in those in-between spaces. Many of them are going to be especially interested in this conversation tonight. Welcome, 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 my friends. Welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the virtual headquarters, the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice. My name is Robert Schreiber. I am the chief activist here at the center and your host for this evening, as I have been for the past year and now like 8 months. We've done this every single weeknight since the pandemic started. Over 400 some odd shows, many of them very odd indeed. And we're thrilled and delighted that you have joined us tonight for this Power Hour, because this Power Hour is going to be something special. I am over the moon to talk to our guest tonight, Eric Michael Garcia, who wrote this wonderful book, We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation. This is a topic we have not addressed enough at all on the Power Hour, so utterly thrilled to chop it up tonight with Eric, and I cannot wait to get to it. But before we do, I do want to entice you all back to come back to our Power Hour. As I said at the outset, we are here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, every single freaking weeknight. And I know that Eric has a lot of friends, a lot of readers, a lot of followers, a lot of fam that are coming out tonight. And if you're here for the first time, do come back. And these are some of the highlights, just some of the highlights that's coming up on this show to entice you to come back to us here at the Power Hour. We're doing Throwback Thursdays all month. We've done, as I said, over 400 shows, all of them extraordinary. And that's the truth. Maybe one was not so much, but the rest of them great. Well, we've had meaningful moments and powerful guests and just folks dropping by that you wouldn't believe. This month, we're going to bring back some of those rebroadcasts and special moments with Denise Froman, Poets for Puerto Rico, Dr. Eric Cervini, queer historian, April Rain, Oscars So White, Amanda Jette Knox, who wrote Loves Lives Here about her transgender family, and of course, one of my favorite episodes ever, and that's the truth, with David Camp, author of Sunny Days, about the children's television revolution during the 70s. And he brought with him Bernadette Yao from Zoom and Emilio Delgado, Luis from Sesame Street. So tune in for all that. And then Friday night, we have another wonderful event. We have Raising BIPOC Queer Voices, curated by the extraordinary poet Kalisa Ray. Coming up on the show, we have Adam Gopnik, one of the greatest thinkers of our modern generation. We have Dr. Peniel Joseph, our beloved BRCSJ board vice president, author of Sword and the Shield, Black Power scholar, just inspiration to us all. Jonathan I, author of Ali, A Life, talking about the upcoming documentary he did with Ken Burns on PBS. Queer yoga every Tuesday. Come take a breath with us, both literally and figuratively. Brian J. Jones, author of Jim Henson, the biography, to celebrate what? Jim Henson's birthday, y'all. Black Boy Joy. We're thrilled to welcome Kwame Umbala to the show. And that is just some of the highlights, that are coming up here on the Power Hour. So do come back and join us. But tonight, my friends, Eric Michael Garcia, author of We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation. As Eric, his own self says, quote, this book is a message from autistic people to their parents, friends, teachers, co-workers, and doctors, showing what life is like on the spectrum. It's also my love letter to autistic people, For too long, we have been forced to navigate a world where all the road signs are written in another language. End quote. With a reporter's eye and an insider's perspective, Eric shows what it's like to be autistic across America. He began writing about autism because he was frustrated by the media's coverage of it, and rightfully so. The myths that the disorder is caused by vaccines, the narrow portrayals of autistic people as white men working in Silicon Valley. His own life as an autistic person didn't look anything like that. And we're so glad he is sharing it in this book and tonight with us. He is Latino, a graduate of the University of North Carolina, and works as a journalist covering politics in Washington, D.C. He realized he needed to put in writing what so many autistic people have been saying for years. Autism is a part of their identity. They don't need to be fixed. And We're Not Broken uses his own life as a springboard to discuss the social and policy gaps that exist in supporting those on the spectrum. From education to healthcare, he explores how autistic people wrestle with systems that were not built with them in mind. At the same time, he shares extraordinary experiences of all types of autistic people, from those with higher support needs to autistic people of color to those in the LGBTQI community. In doing so, Eric gives his community a platform to articulate for themselves their own needs rather than having others speak for them, which has been the standard for far too long, my friends. And amplifying voices is what we are all about here at the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice Power Hour. And this is a community we have indeed not heard enough from. So please help us to rectify that tonight by welcoming Eric Michael Garcia to our Social Justice Power Hour. Eric, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody at the Rustin Center, my friend. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And now I have a story that I tweeted about earlier this week about the late Brother Rustin, which was when I was a student reporter at the University of North Carolina. I was covering the state legislature, and I was waiting for a state legislator. I even forget who it was, but there was an older African American woman who was the receptionist at the desk of this legislator, and her name was Valerie Rustin. And I was trying to build a rapport as like you do, and I said, "Oh, like Bayard," and she says, "Oh, that's my ex-husband's uncle." And I was like, "Oh, I know about Bayard Rustin. He was right-hand man to Martin Luther King Jr. Poor People's Campaign, all that stuff." And it was really cool to because it was really just a privilege to have that link to history, because this was back, this is in 2013, 2012, right when people were starting to care about Bayard Rustin, and it was really, really nice to have that little moment. So I just wanted to put that story out there before we started.
We appreciate that. We appreciate, when I first contacted Eric, just so our viewers know, he was so excited about being with us because of that connection, because of his belief in what Bayard Rustin did and his mission and what we do here at the center, furthering his good name and his good works. So thank you, my friend, for that. At the outset, I want to show the book one more time, just because I know that as we start chopping it up, we're going to get so involved, and I feel like we need a power 2 hours to talk about everything I'd like to. But this is the book we're talking about tonight. The link to buy it will be in the comments section. Our bookshop.org link to all the authors that have appeared on the show. Really important, we support our authors, we support the community. And after you hear Eric talk about this, you're going to want to get this book. So there it is. And let's start doing the do, my friend. There's so much I want to ask you, and I want you to really be as exponential as possible, because this is, again, I want to say this so sincerely, a subject that is so important to our community. Our marginalized communities, especially, are profoundly affected by not being heard. And then when you have the secondary or the tertiary idea of being autistic or having a mental health issue, or whatever else it may be that one has to deal with, it becomes that much more difficult to be heard. And you are out there as a strong and stalwart ally and a voice for all those folks. So thank you for that.
Thank you, my brother. I want to begin this story of autism back in the 1960s with a man by the name of Ola Ivar Lovas. He was, for those who don't know, the pioneer of what people call applied behavior analysis, which encouraged breaking down bigger skills into smaller and more manageable increments. But his version of ABA was harsh, and it was focused on changing what parents found embarrassing. In a Life magazine article called Scream, Slaps, and Love, he featured researchers rewarding good behavior with food and affirmation and punishing them with slapping autistic patients, screaming at them, and even administering electric jolts. In an interview in 1974 with Psychology Today, he said that he derided the way that autistic children rock themselves back and forth or spin around in a circle, never considering that this might be a form of self-regulation. In the same respect, Lovas even questioned whether autistic people were even full. He said that basically they are not people in the psychological case, in the psychological sense, I should say. And why does Mr. Lovas's story matter? His story matters not just because what he was doing to autistic people was brutal, and he did not think that they were human beings. He did not start from a place, a standpoint of that all people have dignity. His practices were also carried over to other communities. In 1970, Dr. Lovas was who ran the UCLA clinic, also assisted with UCLA's Feminine Boy Project and co-authored papers on atypical sexuality. The first study in 1974, Dr. Lovas and a man by the name of George Riekers conducted their work on a 5-year-old boy they called Craig, whose real name was Kirk Murphy. He displayed a tendency to dress in girls' clothes and play with dolls. Kirk Murphy's mother saw a television ad for his program to fix feminine boys and took Kirk. And during the clinical trials, Kirk's mother showed love when he would play with male or masculine toys and was avoided when he would play with feminine toys. When he got back home, if he had a certain amount of chips, red chips, his father would whip him and would beat him, spank him. And the pressures of this were so much that Mr. Murphy tried to join the military. He tried to change who he was, and ultimately the effects were so devastating that that his brother was so traumatized seeing it that he would eventually hide the red chips to prevent his father from giving Kirk spankings. But in 2003, Kirk Murphy took his life. And later on, and this was something that the practitioners of conversion therapy benefited and used for countless research papers, in the same way that applied behavioral analysis and the work of Dr. Lovas was used to condition autistic people. But if I may, quote from Dr. King, Mr. Rustin's great ally and right-hand man, in his letter to a Birmingham jail, he said, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow provincial outside agitator idea." And I open this not because this is a long and drawn out and boring story, though I feel it's important. I say it because the same impulses that force people to try to change autistic people are the same impulses that of the people who try to change LGBTQIA plus people. But in both cases, parents, clinicians, and researchers are trying to make these children worthy of love by removing the very things that define them. When parents make autistic kids not flap anymore or make boys wear jeans instead of dresses, they replace the child that exists with the one they wish existed. And they sentence them to a misery they allege they want their child to avoid. But the fate of autistic and LGBTQIA plus people are intertwined, to say nothing of autistic and queer people, as both groups' right to happiness on their terms are regularly suppressed. But I want people to know that human beings have dignity and are worthy of love as is. And that is how I want to open this. So anyway.
That was beautiful, my friend. Thank you. I feel like we should just stop now. That was just what a beautiful way. But no, there's so much more, and I'd like to, if you're comfortable,
Go ahead.
I want to talk about the book as a whole, and the fact that you did the incredibly important thing and wonderfully meaningful thing of including other voices and other folks in the book.
Yes.
But I want to talk about your personal journey first, if that's okay.
By all means.
So, how difficult has it been for you, and how rewarding has it been for you as an autistic individual?
Oh, that is a great question. So I'll say this. When you're 8 or 13, you don't know, you may know that your parents call you autistic or have Asperger's or whatever, but that doesn't matter to you. Because, and I say this all the time, kids on the schoolyards give diagnostic labels that stick much more than what's in a clinical trial, right? And in the same way, you just know that you don't belong. And in many ways, what you realize is that the world is just as the world's standards for autistic people and disabled people are just as disabling, if not more disabling, than the disability itself. You realize that you are disabled because of how you relate to the world. And with autism, it's about communication and reading social cues, and about being able to articulate what you mean to say, and misunderstanding people. And you recognize that people almost have this unwillingness to learn and to adapt and to change to your neurotype. And you realize that you don't belong. And it sticks with you. I say this all the time. When I was in 4th grade, I was, in special education, like a lot of people were. And the special education program was called RSP. I don't even remember what RSP stood for, but I remember what the kids on the playground said. They said it stood for really stupid people. And that stuck with me for a long time. And I think for a long time, I tried to not talk about it or not address it or try to pass or be seen as normal. But that takes a toll. That burns you out. That wears you out trying to wear a mask. And I think many marginalized communities try to pass and wear a mask, and it takes a toll. It takes not just an emotional toll, a physical toll. It physically exhausts you. It's like wearing one of those, you see people training with like those weighted jackets to go running or something like that, or learning. It's like that. It's like you're carrying a whole other person with you. But in the same time, go ahead. Yeah. But in the same respect, I think that when you come to accept yourself, and when you learn that the things that many people find weird about you are the things that make you who you are, and you would not be the person you are today if it weren't for those things, then you come to accept it, and you come to a crossroads that, okay, you have this, and how do you go about it? Do you go about being angry at the world? And yes, you should be angry. You should get pissed off when the world treats you unfairly, but it should come from a place of accepting yourself, and hopefully that accepting yourself comes out and is transmutated into love for other people, and empathy for other people. And hopefully the thing that bleeds out into every bit of my work. And if there's one thing that can underline my work, it's a love of people. Because when I was younger, as a means to protect myself, I often would be cruel to other people. I would bully other people. I would be mean to girls. I would be mean to kids who were smaller than me. I would bully and pick on other people. But when I came to accept and be okay with myself, it led to me shedding my old ideas about race or my old ideas about gender and sexuality. It led to me erasing my ableism and my sexism and all of these things that I had with me. And hopefully, what it does is that you should. Is that caring about your own marginalized community can be transmutated into you loving humanity in general. So I don't think I'd be the person I am today without being autistic.
And we love that about you, and we love that about the community. If I may, just to dig deeper, can I ask you, was this realization, was this an epiphany? Was there one moment, one thing that happened in your life, or was it a gradual journey into acceptance and even celebration?
Gradual acceptance, I think. I think I started somewhere when I was around college. When I first moved to Washington, D.C., and then a little bit when I read about this in the book that what happened is one night I was out with my friends when I was at university, and some of as college students do, some of them had a little too many, as we do in college, and then we went back to our old office to sober up before we went home, and then I mentioned offhandedly, "Oh, I don't drive because I'm on the spectrum," and then somebody said, "Oh, you're autistic, me too," and that was really the moment that like, oh, there are other people, and the other thing was that my friends continued to invite me back to have those late night events, and like that wasn't going to be that wasn't going to keep me out, and that they were still going to accept me. So that was really so that was, I guess you could say, a small epiphany. Then there were other epiphanies that, like, when I would go to parties and I mentioned that, oh, I don't drink because I'm on the autism spectrum, and then somebody said, oh, there's a lot of other autistic people, and not go to me into giving into things. I think that was another thing. And then I think the biggest thing, oddly enough, I don't think that I came to self-acceptance even after I started writing about autism. I think it was meeting and interacting and reporting and writing this book that I learned to accept myself. We have all these internalized ways that we're taught to hate ourselves. And it comes through meeting people like us that we can shed those, just like how when we meet other people from other communities, we learn to hate them less. We can learn to hate ourselves less when we meet other people like us. So I can't say it was like one flashpoint moment. I think, and I don't even think most epiphanies are that way. I think most of them are slow burning, and then they culminate in that one moment,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Now, when for folks that don't know, the three folks that are watching out of the hundreds who don't know of your career and your vast reportage and how successful you've been in your field, you are worldwide known as a tremendous journalist and author, someone who is celebrated and has been published in almost every single print and online platform you could imagine.
Thank you.
So you've reached a tremendous level of success.
Mm-hmm.
Was it acknowledging that success that caused you to want to write this book and be a powerful and meaningful voice for those who might be struggling?
Yes, and you hit on something that I want to talk about, which was one of the things that I recognize is that I don't want to undersell myself, but because I do think that I've accomplished a lot and I want to be proud of those accomplishments. But at the same time, what I realized was that I was able to do this because I had a very big system of supports and a lot of infrastructure. And one of the things when I started writing about autism that I noticed was that there were people who were smarter than me, that were kinder than I was, who were more generous, who were harder working, who were more gifted or talented in something else, but for whatever reason fell through the cracks. Or for whatever reason, we're having trouble finding a job, or living independently, or graduating from college, or finding a or finding a supportive community. So there, you can approach that with one of two ways. You can think about that one of two ways. You can think either A, I'm exceptional and I was able to do this because I was special, or you think, but for the grace of God, or for the grace, or by sheer luck of the draw, that could be me. And you recognize that it is only because I had these certain supports that often a lot of other people don't have, that you should recognize, that you should say, well, something went wrong here. If there are so many people who are brighter, who are kinder, who are harder working, who are all these things than I am, if they're having trouble, then what's causing that? And so at the heart of everything, you mentioned I'm a political journalist. I'm a generally curious person. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a journalist, right? But so my question was, I decided to hit the road, and my feeling was, okay, we get so much wrong about autism and get so much misunderstanding about it. You know, what does that mean in hard context? What does that mean in terms of being able to see? What does that mean in how these system gaps fail autistic people? How does our misunderstanding manifest into autistic people languishing and not being able to succeed and live the best life that they can? And to me, what I realized was I was able to succeed because I was born in 1990, the year that the Americans with Disabilities Act passed, and the year that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act passed. Those enabled me to succeed. And in the same respect, I was only able to go to college because I went to community college and I got a Pell Grant that allowed me to, pay for school. And I was only able to go to the University of North Carolina because of a scholarship. I was only able to, and I only able to succeed because I had a professor who had a loved one who was autistic, and he helped me during my classes, in my writing classes, because he understood it. And what that said to me is that I'm able to succeed because of these deliberate social goals that society made. And conversely, what I realize is how many times people are failed, it's because we didn't think about, or we didn't take into consideration what autistic people's needs are. So I wanted to hit the road and find out why that was the case. And hopefully I did that with this book.
You absolutely 100%, which is why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation. We had on the show in our early days, we were honored to have on Raquel Willis, who is a transgender activist who was one of the organizers of that incredible Black Lives Matter rally in Brooklyn for transgender lives as well, back last summer. And she talked about something that I think totally defines who you are and why this book is so important. She talked about the idea of a possibility model. A possibility model is someone who is in that community who can show others heretofore unseen possibility in that community.
Yeah, and I think that what I hadn't heard of that term, possibility model. That's damn good. I'm gonna write it down real quick. And it was Raquel Willis, correct?
Indeed.
Yeah, I want to be able to give her credit. Those are the preferred pronouns, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. That is interesting, like that possibility model, because like I think that it's interesting you mentioned the possibility model, because yes, when you see yourself in these types of positions, you're able to see that that could be me, I could do that, or that's something I can do, that's something that's possible. And in the same respect, that what you also need to say, I think that when it comes to possibility models, yes, you could give a possibility model to the disabled person themselves, or the autistic person themselves, or the transgender person themselves, or the marginalized person themselves. But then what you do is, not only do you say that I'm a possibility, that I can be what you say, is you tell the community around that person that it was only possible for me to do this because I had a system in place. And then what you do is you demand and you argue that those systems that were in place for me, that allowed me to succeed, be possible for everybody else. Because then what it does is it no longer, because a lot of people like to say that I'm extraordinary. What I want to do is I want to universalize it to make the extraordinary just ordinary. It shouldn't be extraordinary for an autistic person to graduate from college. Because, I'm sure we all see those stories of, autistic person, human interest story, autistic person graduates valedictorian from college. Why is that a news story? It's because news stories are something that doesn't happen all the time, right? Wouldn't it be great if an autistic person could graduate from college and it's not a news story, and just a normal autistic person could just be And it's because there were those systems in place that allowed autistic people to succeed. It would be great if there were autistic people who could get a job, and that job was something that wasn't in and of itself remarkable, that autistic people could hold employment. I want to make the remarkable unremarkable. Or what I want is that I want people to focus on the remarkable things autistic people can do, not make remarkable the fact that they have a job or that they graduate from college or things like that. Because the thing about it that I learned traveling the country is autistic people, and I hope that this bleeds through in the book, that autistic people are amazing. And autistic people are fantastic human beings. And what that said to me was that, like, if there are so many autistic people who are amazing who can't succeed, what does that say about us? What does that say about everybody else, that we aren't putting in place all the things we can to ensure that autistic people, these amazing, incredible autistic people we have around us, are languishing? What does that say? That should be an indictment of all of us.
Yeah, 100%. So let's chop it up about that. Let's talk about. There's a great analogy you make. You say that imagine navigating life when all the road signs are written in a different language.
Yes.
So can you address? There's a two-part question. I want you to answer this part first, and I'm going to give you a follow-up, as they say in your profession.
Sure.
The first part is, can you address some of those difficulties so we as a community can understand what an autistic person has to navigate day in and day out, both normally and, in extraordinary circumstances? And then I would love to follow up with how, as we as a community, as friends, as allies, as family, as co-workers, how can we help in that journey?
So I think I can answer your first question, your second question first, just to be. I think the best way you could do that is just to ask. It sounds so simple, but the thing of it is that because for so long autistic people were thought of as incapable of having inner thoughts, or incapable of speaking for themselves, or incapable of communicating for themselves, for so long our opinions have been discredited, and it's almost like a catch-22, wherein, like, if I articulate my needs as an autistic person, the thing is like, oh, well, then you must not be really autistic, or, well, you can't speak for my kid. And then conversely, if an autistic person has higher support needs, or needs more, or can't speak with their words or with their mouth, it's like, well, how can we really know what they're saying, what they think, or how can they're autistic, and we trivialize their needs. So I think that the first thing, the most important thing to do is ask, and to include autistic people at any discussion about autism. Any discussion about autism should include autistic angelic troublemakers, to borrow from your shirt and from the late brother Rustin. The first question, that one's a little tougher, I think. I think the thing to take into account is that a lot of times autistic people, because social cues and social niceties, these are things that are constructed, and they aren't something that come natural to us. A lot of times it's really hard to understand people when you're being when you're being sarcastic or being literal. So I think a lot of times it's just be as clear and concise with autistic people, and be as straightforward with them as possible. And also, create a play. It was interesting when I was interviewing someone. Her name is Marcelle Champy. She works with helping autistic people find work. She said that she has always regretted disclosing being autistic in any workplace. And think about that. Think about how did we create a workplace where autistic people are scared of disclosing? So one of the things you should do is that autistic people, is that, like, I think a lot of times it's because even using things like fluorescent lighting are just taken for granted, and you don't think about how that could be sensory overwhelming. So I think the other thing is, also a lot of times, when it comes to job interviews, it seems like employers ask you a question not to get the actual answer for a question, but to see how you answer a question. And that makes things much more difficult. In the same way, I think in our relationships and our friendships, people get, wind up being, more using sarcasm or using doublespeak or not being as straightforward or not being as honest or not being as, clear and concise as possible. And that can be overwhelming because then again, it can be very difficult. But then also, I worry about just making it about interpersonal relationships because a lot of these things are just structural too, just like they are with structural racism or structural any kind of phobias or any kind of sexism or xenophobia or misogyny or whatever. In the same way, the fact of the matter is that the problem with, asking for accommodations is in and of itself that you have to ask for them. And that puts the onus on the disabled person rather than the society to change. What should be done is instead, autistic people should be consulted whenever there's, and this relates to the follow-up, is that like they should be consulted in constructing any kind of system. So that's a long-winded way of saying that, but I don't know if that actually answered your question, but I hope that it helped.
No, 100. It's important, and I think that what we don't realize is there are small and large factors that affect the autistic community. And you mentioned something like fluorescent lights, and that's probably something that most people wouldn't consider. Of course, being more direct in a question, that's something that I think most of us understand the need, but there are all these other smaller and larger factors that would behoove us to understand about what the autistic community needs.
Yes, exactly. Just like with anything, there's the interpersonal and then the infrastructural, and both of those things need to be addressed and need to be fixed. And I think so, for example, I think for a long time, a lot of the discussions about autism were done. We spent decades talking about autism while talking past autistic people because we didn't think that they could speak. So it wasn't until 1980 that autism got its own separate diagnosis in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Think about that. It first appeared, I have it right here, sorry. It first appeared in 1952 in the DSM under a symptom of schizophrenia, and it was labeled and it was cataloged the condition under the umbrella diagnosis of psychotic reactions in children. And then again, it was included in the DSM-2, again as a symptom of schizophrenia. It didn't get its own diagnosis until 1980 as a separate diagnosis. And until then, it wasn't. You didn't get PDD-NOS, you didn't get Asperger's syndrome, and ultimately you get ASD, which is autism spectrum disorders, in 2013. But all the while, we weren't listening to autistic people. So all of these kind of policies and all these kind of structural things were all kind of done without us in mind. So as a result, we're stuck trying to navigate them without even really thinking about, without people really thinking about how they could affect us.
And the language you just used was so loaded. There were so many trigger words in there: psychotic and schizophrenic, and right. And not only are they ill-defining, they're ugly. They're actually hateful.
They've been used for some pretty bad things, and those words have been used as a tool and as a battering ram, and as a rationale for institutionalizing people, and as a rationale for using shock therapy on them, or as a rationale for using kind of really brutal types of tools and implements against them.
If I may, and again, if I'm overstepping, please do let me know.
Okay.
Can you recount something that was a very difficult moment for you, just so our community can understand what and how you've persevered?
I think the thing that the difficult moment, I think, was I'm going to just read straight from I'm going to just read straight from the book because I think that's better.
Please do.
I was bullied constantly when I was growing up. I still remember when my classmates in 4th grade coaxed me into moving the front of my body up and down a tree. I didn't realize it was something called humping, and it was sexual until much later. When I was a freshman in high school, in an effort to fit in with kids, I frequently picked on other kids, harassing, hazing, humiliating them. In one of these cases, I was the kid being hurt. In the other, I was doing the hurting. But at its core, I was desperate for any kind of love and friendship. It's I think that's better than me coming up with something off the top of my head, because I think what it shows is that in so many ways, autistic people, I think that I wanted to fit in and I wanted to be like everybody else. I wanted people to accept me. So I did whatever they told me. And then I also wanted people to accept me. And the way that I did was by harassing or hazing or brutalizing other people and bullying other people. And in one instance, I was tormented, in the other, I was a tormentor, and I didn't realize that I was being exploited. And in other ways, I was exploiting other people. So I think what I wanted to do, and I understand that these stories might be triggering for some people, or they might be bringing up bad memories for people. So I want to be sensitive to that. But I think that it's important for me to say that a lot of times what I was doing was I was trying to find a place, and I was trying to navigate, and I was trying, and oftentimes I think people took advantage or exploited that desire to fit in and that desire to be loved by humiliating me. So I think another example is a lot of times when I was too trusting of people, that would lead me to, when I was in college, a lot of times I wanted people to like me. So what would I do? I would do my homework, do their homework for them, or things like that. So I think it's hard for me to say, but I think that was an example. I think those are some examples.
And it's kind of cyclic, right? In that you will go out of your way to make others comfortable, to make others like you, to make others accept you. And those other folks don't understand, don't appreciate, aren't fully cognizant of your motivations.
Or they don't reciprocate. Yeah.
Right. And therefore make it much more of a difficult situation. And it's something that you have to learn to extricate yourself from rather than anybody else.
Yeah, and oftentimes it takes somebody else. So in a lot of cases, it was my sister standing up for me at the schoolyard, and God bless my sister, just because she understood what was going on. And later on, it was, my family putting me in my place when I was bullying people and saying, sit, and this isn't acceptable. And it was the forgiveness of those people who I didn't deserve their forgiveness, but they forgave me. So it was those things that put me back in my place, or taught me to stand up for myself, or taught me that certain things aren't acceptable and that I shouldn't be that way. So.
And this is the book we're talking about for folks that might be just joining us during the Power Hour. We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation, with our wonderful guest tonight, Eric Garcia. What I find extraordinary about this book is that you could have written it from your own perspective. It could have been a one person, here's what I've been through, here's what I've persevered through, here's what I've succeeded at, here's my journey. And it would have been a fantastic book. And that's the gosh darn truth. But what you chose to do is do something even more meaningful. Is you reached out to families and to individuals across the spectrum.
Yeah.
Both, autism, gender identity, marginalized communities, et cetera, to find these voices, to show that the autism community is as multicolored, as multicultural, as multifaceted as any other community. And I guess my direct question to you is, what prompted that? Because for many of us, we would have said, I have this great story to tell. Here's my story.
I tend to think that I'm a pretty boring person. But in all seriousness, I'm just curious. And I think that my impulse as a journalist, and I think this is what makes me a journalist, is that I was like, to your point, I could have very easily written a memoir, and I think a lot of people wanted me to. I know that some people wanted me to. But I think that my feeling was, okay, I have my story, but my story is just that. It's my story. It's not reflective of any other thing. And I worried that if I just wrote about my story, that people would just say, oh, well, look at this extraordinary person. But I'm not just interested in people caring about, oh, look at me. I care about the larger systems in place. And I also knew that my story, I guess I caught it, this is just my self-doubt speaking, but it's just like, I was like, oh, I don't feel like my story is reflective of everybody else's. And I was like, or else I was like, I think the other thing was like, I know that this was me, but was this the same case with everybody else? And I just decided, I was like, oh, well, there's only one way to find out. Ask people, or profile people, or see how do you differentiate from other people, or what are those common threads, or what are the kind of ties that bind us. So I think it was more generally out of curiosity and also not wanting to take up the stage because I'm just a generally it may sound weird for somebody who wrote a whole damn book, but like I'm not like I worried that like it would just be about me when hold on, I'm gonna okay, so Jim Sinclair uses the term self-narrating zoo exhibit. They used it. So the fear of becoming a self-narrating zoo exhibit, as Sinclair put it, is one reason I did not want this book to become a memoir. I do not fault other autistic people's decision to write memoirs. They were integral to getting non-autistic audiences to understand that autistic people had agency, and those works have had great influence on me. But when I decided to start writing about autism as an autistic person, I chose to place myself within the larger context of autism's narrative. I know plenty of parents clamor for stories of autistic people like me as inspiration, but the truth is I am not special. I want them to see my story as a projector that broadcasts the stories of other autistic people. If I'm going to write about myself, I'm taking as many autistic people as I can along with me. That's just for my book, and I just wanted to include that. So that's a better articulation than I could say off the top of my head.
No, and I think it's wonderful to give people a strong idea of what's in this book and how important it is. And I love the idea. This is a term that I'm going to now steal from you, being a projector. I like that very much.
Yeah.
Well done there, my friend. So what I also like is when we have folks from different communities, marginalized communities, communities that aren't heard from, communities that need to be recognized. Too often we fall into the trap of wanting to celebrate all the heroes and all the extraordinary folks and all the people that have done wonderful things. Mm-hmm. But what we need to absolutely realize is within every community, there are the same assholes, the same jerks, the same folks who do bad things, who make poor choices, who are just human. And that's the thing, is we need to look across and see everybody involved and everybody who identifies as this, that, and other thing as not just extraordinary folks, not just heroes, but also just those who walk amongst us every day, who are in the supermarket, on the street, driving the car next to us, etc., etc.
I say this as an asshole. Thank you. Yeah, we should. The weird thing about any marginalized community is that your existence is seen as a referendum on that community, which is weird, right? But like as Sly Stone said, I'm everyday people, The weird thing about it is that like, and like you said, what I wanted to do is I wanted to highlight the regular people in my book. There are plenty of extraordinary people, and I think autistic people are amazing, but there are dicks in my community too, just like there are dicks in every other community, and I want people to recognize that autistic people have a right to be normal and be human and be flawed and they have the right to be as complex as human beings are in general. But for some reason, we tend to think that if an autistic person is this or that or the other, they're either A, incapable of having the same rights as everybody else, or they're a reflection of the entire community. But the right to be human is also the right to screw up. The right to grow up is the right to screw up. And you should be judged on your merits as a human being. You should be called out when you're wrong. Lord knows I deserve to be called out when I'm wrong. And you deserve to be supported where you need support, and you deserve to be lifted up when you're accomplishing things. But and like you said, there's this temptation, and I get the temptation to show the best of the best. But we also deserve to highlight the people who are as messed up or as flawed or as fall short as any other group of humanity.
Because people is people.
People are people, and people are really complicated. And they should be complicated. People should be allowed to live complex lives, as long as they're not hurting anybody.
Well, yeah. So here's a difficult question, and I want to phrase it in the right way. There are behaviors that autistic folks exhibit, and of course there's a wide spectrum thereof, right? And some absolutely need to be recognized and accepted as part and parcel of who they are, their personality,
Yes.
their very identity. But then there are other pieces of it that may behoove them, first and foremost, and those around them to help alleviate or to help.
Yes.
I don't want alter is a dangerous word to use, but
Alleviate, I think, could be is good.
so how does one delineate between those behaviors?
I think the question is something really hurting someone, you know? So like, let's go back to Oliver Lovas and applied behavioral analysis. The reason why he came up with it, why he tried to stop those behaviors, was because they were embarrassing to the parents. It wasn't that they were harming anybody, they were embarrassing. So I think that those symptoms or those traits that aren't really hurting anybody shouldn't, and they in some ways they might help autistic people, those should not be changed if they're not hurting anybody. But to the extent that they're harming some people, they're actively causing bodily harm, or it comes to violating personal space, I think that those ones should be instructed or should be mitigated. I think mitigated might be a better word than ameliorated, or but it's hard to use it's hard to find the right words, and I'm trying to use my words carefully. See, even writers struggle with that. But it's like when, just like with everything else, you have a right to be who you are and live your life and all those things, but you don't have a right to cause harm to anybody else. So a lot of times, I was giving this advice to a parent in a column about what to do when their son, who's autistic, keeps on bugging a teacher. And I've said this, hold on, I have it right here, which is what I say, is that when you're violating personal space, because I've copped this too. I'm not saying I'm exempt from this. Back in the day, I used to be pretty terrible to women. And I used to violate their personal space or bombard them with messages or things like that. So I'm saying this from a place of knowing, is that, so what I've said is, autism is never an excuse to violate someone's personal space or ignore their consent. Everyone's actions are still their own. And just as autistic people should expect to be treated with respect, we should respect other people. And just because we don't understand social rules, which is real, doesn't mean we should violate other people's personal space. And there's a misconception that autistic people aren't empathetic, which we are. We just don't often know how other people react. But one of the best things to do is to probably discuss with people how this might make the other person on the receiving end feel. Because we are empathetic, but we just might not read the social cues. But let other people know that this might not make someone else feel good. Let them know that it won't lead to people liking them, or it won't lead to people being around them. It won't lead to positive results. And at the same time, it's important to recognize that it might even come from a place of hurt, and understand where that hurt comes from. So that's the best argument I can make.
And I think that's what I was hoping you would say, to be honest. It kind of led you right into it. If you forgive me, there are two things I wanted to pull at from that. One is, you talk about the parents being embarrassed, and that is such a dangerous trap that folks fall in. They're
yes,
like, your behavior embarrasses me, and even their instincts and their belief that if it embarrasses me, it must embarrass you, so we're going to fix you. But they have to realize that it doesn't embarrass the individual. They're either not aware of it, or that's who they are, and you can't go from that dimension.
Yeah, exactly. Like, some embarrassing behaviors, like, of course, you don't want your kid flipping off the cashier at the grocery store, but other ones are, if it gives them comfort, like, one of the things, like, I remember, like, I used to, because I needed to stim a lot when I was younger. My mom, and I love my mom is a wonderful person, but she would also often get stressed out, or she would try to stop me from when I was trying to stim, or when I was trying to do something with my hands just to calm myself down. And the thing I would just often say is, I'm not hurting you. What am I doing? Is this hurting you? Is this harming other people? If it's not causing anybody a fuss, but it's calming me down, can you please let me do this thing? And I think it's, once again, it's about, autistic people and any type of people articulating their needs and saying, this thing is how I navigate the world. And I think that parents need to respect that if it's not something that embarrasses other people, like you need to ask yourself, is this embarrassing everybody else or is it embarrassing me? And is this a me problem?
And
And
that's the same parallel that we were making at the outset. You talked about the queer community, and a lot of parents accept their kids who are on the LGBTQI spectrum, wherever they may be, but
yeah,
they're fearful for their safety, for other people accepting them, for what's going to happen to them as they
yeah,
go on to greater society. And I think that there's a tremendously strong parallel with autistic folks too, that folks are concerned and how others are going to perceive them.
that is absolutely, you hit the nail right on the head. It leads to parents often get, or caretakers often get in their own head and they're like, well, what if other people judge them or things like that? But I go back to a phrase that Kayvon Stassen, who is a professor at Vanderbilt University, who has an autistic son, he said, I wouldn't change my son for the world, so I'm going to change the world for my son. That's the perfect. Isn't that a great? A lot of people might think that I'm anti-parent or things like that I'm too hard on parents. Isn't that a lovely way to start something? That's a great starting off point. So like you should ask yourself, why am I embarrassed about this? Is it a me problem or are other people thinking about this? Or why do I care about this? Why does this matter to me? And if your answer is that it's more of a me problem and it's not something that's hurting anybody else, then yeah, that's probably something you should change.
Yeah,
and I say this because I've been on both ends of that. I've wanted to change people because I was embarrassed for them, and people have tried to change me because they were embarrassed for me. So I say this from being both ends of that.
And you just gave me a great insight. You also mentioned a few minutes back that autistic folks don't lack empathy. More to the point, they lack the ability to see how their actions affect others. Did I get that right?
Yeah, they often may not read it immediately. Like, I'll give you an example. A lot of times, when I've said something offensive or I realize that I hurt something, immediately, like, I may not see it on their facial expressions, things like that, but like when I've learned later, oh my God, I realize I might have offended someone. Oh my God, like I feel awful, and I try to apologize, or I try to realize, like, because I realize that, yeah, I didn't realize that might hurt people. And in some ways, we might feel things even more intensely. We might empathize with people even more intensely. It's almost like it's too much to bear. But but because we may not see immediately, or we may not read immediately the signs, we might miss that. But we still feel it, and we still care, and we want to do the right thing.
We want to do the right thing. That's perfect. I knew this would go too quickly, and
I knew it would too, my friend.
And I want to show the book again. This is the book we've been discussing all evening. We're Not Broken: Changing the Autism Conversation, which you are absolutely doing, both as a possibility model in your career and in your life, and in this book. And unfortunately, we didn't get to all the incredible stories that are in this book. So now people have the great opportunity to actually buy the book. Because there are all these great stories from families and individuals who you sought out, and as a journalist were able to find some extraordinary things that need to be shared. So this is the book, We're Not Broken. The link to buy it is right there in the comments section for all y'all. It's bookshop.org. We love bookshop.org because they give back to independent bookstores. And when you put your zip code in to ship the book, they find the most local of your independent bookstores. So it's wonderful. Buy this book for yourself, buy it for a friend, buy it for an enemy who'll become a friend, buy it for your local school district. This would be a great asset, not only for teachers and administrators, but for students themselves. And finally, although we want to encourage everyone to buy the book themselves, there are a lot of folks who don't have the financial means to do so. And for them, their conduit for ideas like this are their local libraries. So call your local library and say, do you have a copy of We're Not Broken on your shelves? And if they do not, you say, as a patron, I beseech you to get 1 or 2 or 5 copies for your community. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Eric, for this conversation, for all the work you're doing, for the inspiration you're giving. I hope we can have you back on again. I'd love to go deeper into this, but this has been a wonderful introduction.
Bug me anytime you want, man.
All right, be well. Best to your family. Best to you. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you.
So that is Eric Garcia, and I'll show you the book again. We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation. And absolutely, no doubt, no diggity, this book and Eric does that. So I beseech you, this is a book that you will not only enjoy and be touched by, but it will change you and it will help you to help others. And you can't get better than that, my friends, right? Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You all who watched and were party to this conversation tonight. Thank you, Eric, for being with us. We are here, as I said at the outset, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, every single freaking weeknight. Please do come back and be with us. We are here for you. So until soon, much love and respect, y'all. Be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And most especially, my friends, especially after a conversation like this, be good to yourselves. You need it, and we need you here with us.
In every community, a group of angelic troublemakers.